It's cold brew season, and Trade has you covered for the warmer weather months. Sign up for a cold brew subscription and get coffees designed specifically for making cold brew delivered right to your door. But how do you make cold brew at home? Well, for a limited time, you get a Hario cold brewer with your subscription for absolutely free. That's a $30 value. Just pour, fill, and chill and have your own cold brew right at home. Plus, shipping is always free. Go to unitedwedrink.com/trade to start your subscription today. Better coffee is waiting for you with Trade. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, coworkers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another new episode of the United We Drink podcast right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich. We are recording in a holiday week here in America. I think I called it America Boom Boom Day at the end of the last episode. I don't quite remember. But yeah, so let me. Kevin and Tim are here.
Hello.
I actually have a question regarding this for you guys. For Kevin being a business owner of a brewery, and Tim, who has worked in many. Stay open, close, limited hours. What's the deal that you've typically done or seen for the 4th of July, Kevin?
This goes to show how disconnected I am from the tap room. Sometimes I have no idea. We leave it up to our tap room manager of when they want to close, and I know we've closed in the past, but I cannot tell you whether we're going to be open or not this 4th of July. We've closed previously, but I think we always close on Christmas. And I believe we usually are closed on Thanksgiving. But other than that, I just think it's important to let the taproom manager look at the numbers, decide whether or not it makes sense, and just roll with that. And they don't have to get our buy-in for it.
I do not see anything on your social. Oh, no, you are closed. There we go. It's in the stories. You are closed on July 4th.
See, now you know and I don't. Thank you. I hope that makes me look like a good, empowering boss and not a idiot. So, I mean, let's do an instant poll. Am I an idiot?
Typical out of touch owner. That's what I hear.
Tim, when you were at Badger Hill, Unmapped, I don't remember the one in between there.
2, yeah. It depended. So I think, if I recall correctly, Badger Hill was typically open for a little bit on 4th of July, but not super late. They might be very different now in their current location because they're right next to the racetrack, and the racetrack typically has fireworks, things like that. So I'm willing to bet they'll be open late this 4th of July. Unmapped, I guess I don't recall. It all kind of depended on, just thinking about breweries around here, it really kind of depends on how close they are to festivities, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the neighborhoods or suburbs or whatever have their own thing. So like Excelsior Brewing, they're right there by Lake Minnetonka, which is like the big lake in the metro area with a lot of fireworks. So I would imagine they would definitely be open late. Whereas a lot of the ones that are more in industrial parks, they might as well just shut down. No one's going out to them. Now it's also maybe going to be different because it's a Friday, right? So when a holiday falls in the
Yeah,
middle of the week,
very true. Yeah.
you know what I mean? Having it on a Friday, it could be a double-edged sword. It could be why be open on a Friday when everyone is out doing other things, or it could be hey, like I would imagine Thursday night, tomorrow night would actually be a really big one at a lot of the tap rooms around here. Um, Anytime that a holiday falls on a Friday or a Monday the night before that holiday usually ends up being huge.
I agree with you on that. Like the day before Thanksgiving is always a huge drinking day.
Mhm.
The Sundays before Memorial and Labor Day for us have traditionally been very good days. Um, we are we're staying open. We're opening noon to 7. We've typically done noon to 6, but we decided to keep it open one more hour this year because of it being a Friday. Um, and watch if it fails, it'll all come back at me. But what I used as an example is that my previous brewery. Um, we were open for a Friday, 4th of July once, and were absolutely slammed, like, almost all day. It wasn't until, like, between 8 and 9 that things died down. Um, and that place is right around the corner from Copper Point. So, like, some similar type of people, but, um it's still I think 7's a good time, and we even said, like, if it's really not doing well, close at 6 and just put a sign on the door, saying that we closed an hour early, leaving it up to the bar staff to make a call on that. Um, but what's also funny is going back to the previous brewery, so the following year, it being on a Saturday, dead as shit. Like, no, like, and they just decided I think we were going to be open till 8, and they ended up closing at like 6 because it was that dead. But yeah, walkable places where that are near like festivities, big parties, I gotta assume are going to be doing buku bucks with stuff. Places that have food, especially too.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Minnesota, 4th of July in particular, Labor Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, those are really big cabin weekends. So
People go out of town.
people go out of town. Like I already, my boss was already talking about being annoyed that we did so much today, meaning that tomorrow was going to be a really long day, and he was really hoping to get out of town so he could get to his cabin. But if he doesn't get out of town until like 8, he might just wait until Friday morning to leave, which, isn't that big of a deal. But, people are going to be getting out of town too. So some places I think might even be surprised that they're not as busy as they're expecting.
Gotcha.
I do want to mention that, Mike, what you were talking about, like walkable places, like you guys both gave examples of like places people would want to go because they're out and about. One of the reasons why we've kind of taken the stance we have is that we're in the middle of an industrial park, like so many breweries are, and no one just comes. I mean, we just do not get any kind of crowds on any holiday whatsoever. So it's kind of we've always tried to do, oh, let's do a to go special or let's do something. People will pick up beer on the way to their barbecue. Just doesn't happen. And after 10 years of doing this, it's kind of, I think we've waved the white flag. We're just not going to try anymore. I mean, I think it's just a craft beer industry in general, but barrel of monks when it comes to holidays.
I mean, we're in an industrial park too, but it just shows what 10 miles can really do for different crowds
Sure.
on that. Um, what are you guys drinking? I mean, Tim, you already said that you're having decaf coffee. Did you spike it with anything?
I didn't. I thought about spiking it with something, but I just, walked in the door. I'm kind of exhausted. I have another long day tomorrow. I might just make this a dry evening of just decaf cold brew and half and half. I don't know. We'll see if I get feisty.
Nice.
So
No judgment.
I was in Tampa with my son last weekend or the weekend before, and because even though it's in Florida, it's a different market, and they get different beers from us. And I don't know if you guys remember this bad boy, Mocha by
Yeah.
Southern Tier. So this was part of the original Blackwater series with oat, and then Mocha was a mix of Java and chocolate. And this was one of like the OG like it beers for me that I used to like when I had a girlfriend in Virginia. I would like pick up Southern Tier and bring this home, and I would share it with people like Mike at Coffee District for our beer shares. And apparently that was out of the market. They stopped doing Mocha, Java, Chocolat, which is mind blowing to me. I thought it was just not available in Florida, but no, they stopped making them. They brought it back this last year. And I saw a one 4-pack, and I said, this is mine. It is absolutely delicious. It is, it's a little over the top. The chocolate's big. It's got a lot of sweetness to it. But compared to most pastry stouts these days, it's refined and elegant because of how crazy the market's gotten. I would rather have this than like 99.9% of all the other silly pastry stouts in the world. So I have 4 bottles. I did one for Old Favorite Friday, one tonight. I got 2 more to go around.
Well, you are what you drink, Kevin. You are very refined and elegant.
Thank you.
That beer was like a precursor to the pastry stouts or those beers, the Blackwater series of beers. Chocolate, like I still want to call it chocolate because I was like, why are you adding? You and many other people called it chocolat, and I'm like, you're just everything else is pronounced the way that it is. Why is that one different?
Didn't they spell it? Didn't they spell it weird? I thought they spelled
but they
it
also
differently.
spelled mocha different. They spelled Java with an H at the end.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
And I was just like, it's just pronounced the way it is. But then you came along, Kevin, and you made pastry stouts what it is today, or what it was yesterday.
It has nothing to do. I'm not to blame. These guys are to blame. And by the way, like this is such a great beer, and I'm enjoying it so much. But going back to the Blackwater series, oat was fantastic. Their oatmeal Imperial Stout was great.
Yeah,
like I love that beer. So I love Southern Tier. They also had a cherry. What was it? It's a cherry beer, like a cherry pie kind of thing. If you go to the website, you'll see it. It was out as well. I enjoyed it. I picked it up because I like Southern Tier. We don't get a lot of their stuff in South Florida, so I picked it up too. It's not a one I would go to every day, but it tracked with what they do as far as like those over the top beers. And I wish I got more Southern Tier stuff. I miss like the old school pale ale. I miss the 2X IPA. I miss all that stuff. But these guys are good, and I'm happy to be drinking this. Tim, what are you drinking? Oh no, we already talked about that. Mike, what are you drinking?
I'm having my last can of Burial Skillet, their donut stout. It's such a good stout. It's like, and I think I mentioned before, there's no donuts in it. It's just a coffee stout that they say like, oh, they did it in such a way with grains to make it taste like a chocolate donut in a cup of coffee. It's excellent. And then I have a can of Copper Point Lager to back it up after that. So, we said styles here, like we said stout, lager, IPA, pastry stout, all of that stuff. And that type of stuff is what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about styles and how the market doesn't seem to give a fuck about styles anymore, except for maybe
the movie
IPA.
Teen Wolf. Sorry.
What?
The movie Teen Wolf.
That is a style, yeah. And there's styles.
There's styles, yeah.
But Teen Wolf is a style of movie as well. It is the transformation movie. That is a style. But
Kevin, I appreciated the styles.
I'm sorry. I thought it was going to be great.
But I thought it was wonderful. I was immediately picturing him driving a van. So,
so
Back to reality.
One thing one beverage related podcast that I listen to, which is not this podcast. I don't listen to this podcast.
Who
I
would?
listen to the beer brewing trends from Kodo Design. They're a design firm out of Indianapolis who deal with a lot of beverage related clients. And one thing that I love that they bring up all the time is really that styles are dead. Like, people don't care about what style your beer says that it is anymore. It's all about flavors. Tell me what flavors. Tell me what this tastes like. Um, so I'm not really in touch with the youngins or even the it people anymore to know if I really believe that. So let's start off with you, Kevin. Do you believe that no one cares about actual styles? Is it all about just flavors?
I have to admit, I may be out of touch myself when it comes to that. But I also think that when we talk about the craft beer market or the beer market in general, who are we talking about? Are we talking about craft beer people? They just care about the flavors and they don't care about the styles? Because I would say the greater market, the people that are actually keeping the lights on at my brewery, the ones that are buying beers at grocery stores, I think all they care about is styles. And I think one of the biggest problems we have in this industry is that we have no regulation on styles. And one IPA tastes completely different from another IPA. And we have a situation where people have abandoned that market, craft beer in general, because they don't know what it means. They go, oh, I had one IPA that I loved. It was from some brewery, Cigar something in Tampa. And then I had this other IPA from this other brewery, and they couldn't be more different. I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to drink these IPA beers anymore. I'm just going to drink my light lager, and they all taste the same. I think one of the big problems we have with the bigger market, which I think most craft breweries, at least with a 20 barrel system and trying to make lots of beer, have to play in that sandbox. I think one of the things we're really missing is that we don't adhere to styles at all, and I think it hurts us.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a bastardization of styles to a point, and like this isn't anything new, right? I think I've mentioned on here before that one time I drank what was called an IPA, and it had both lactose and lactobacillus. And I was like, just because you put a lot of hops in doesn't make it an IPA. Like there was nothing IPA about it. Like, sure, maybe it started off as an IPA recipe, but all beer starts off with a very similar recipe. The difference between styles is in those details, right? And so when you're adding all these things, and that's not to say you can't do, oh, I did a fruited IPA versus a regular IPA, but at some point it crosses a threshold to where it becomes a new style, right? I mean, what's the difference between a porter and a stout? Whatever the brewer put on the label. At this point, right? At some point, it maybe was something, but we've changed it so much where it's crossed an invisible threshold to a point where these things don't mean anything to the average consumer. And I think consumers have just, I guess in this market, I see people just sort of abandoning that, right? Right now, there are kind of 2.5 styles of beer. There's hazy IPA. I'm not going to call it West Coast, just traditional IPA, and there's lager, and that is about it. Now, the nerds, if you hop on Beer Advocate, the nerds will talk about how that's not true, and everyone blah 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 blah. But even like I saw a thread on Minnesota Beer on Reddit where someone was asking for recommendations of who makes the best Mexican lager, because he had just got done traveling like Central America, and he really enjoyed a lot of the styles of beer that were there. And they listed off all these things, and I was like, there's nothing Mexican about that other than the fact that the brewer called that Mexican. Like maybe they put maize in there, but it does not taste like a beer that you would get in Mexico. But all of these things just became so artificial that I don't know that even I would trust the label that is on a can or a bottle that it's going to taste anything like that, other than the breweries that are known for making things more traditionally.
You know, the Mexican lager thing is a good point because I remember a few years ago a lot of debate on beer Twitter about Mexican lager because there isn't a style for Mexican lager, and if you look at what the Mexican brewers are brewing, they're making Euro type of lagers. They're not. There isn't corn added to it. There isn't any sweeteners added to most of those beers. They are very European in style, brewed by Mexicans.
Yeah.
And
Most of the like the quote unquote historically Mexican lagers were Germans that relocated to Mexico, so they're Vienna lagers more than anything.
so it's again like what you said before, this kind of bastardization of a style, almost in this way, just like making bullshit up, and maybe that is a thing that messes with people as well. Is the fact that there are so many styles, there's always styles kind of coming out of the woodwork and being told like, oh, you got to try this new style. Like, oh, well, what is it? Like, it's blah 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 blah. And I think to your typical consumer, they don't care
They don't give a
about that,
shit.
and
They
and it's
don't.
just it's a whole lot of stuff being thrown at them, and it probably turns them off. The fact that like you just say like I like there's some level of dumbing down that I feel like breweries are somewhat doing now. So this topic came to us from friend of the show, Eric Hild. Hi, Eric. And he, in texting with Tim and I, gave an example of a beer that they brewed. He said, was it a French Pilsner or
Yeah, slopes. Yeah,
that is what they originally called it as a style, and people just kept on asking, "Well, what makes it French?" Well,
yeah.
and then they're talking about the grain that's used and the hops that are used, and people were just so confused by it. But they're like, "But you're not French," blah 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 blah, and then they just decided it's a pilsner, and they
Yeah.
just decided to cut the name French from it and just go with like, all right, it's a pilsner.
It's what everyone who was making a hoppy wheat should have done in 2015, 2016, myself included. One of my favorite beers I ever made was a hoppy wheat, and no one made it. I guarantee you, if I would have called that a hazy IPA, it would have fucking sold because it
Oh
was
yeah.
that good. But because it was that good, and
But
so I think you know, in some ways we've muddied it by uh, constantly changing this shit too.
But I think we're still talking about different markets that we're marketing these beers to. And you have the not passive, but the more novice consumer of craft beers that wants it to be simple. They want to try an IPA, whether it's a hazy IPA or a West Coast IPA, whatever it is, and they want every IPA they taste to taste kind of like it, whether or not it tastes a little bit different because of the hop usage, and maybe this one leans more grapefruit and this leans more lemon zest, whatever it is. But they want to have a similar amount of bitterness to it. And then you have the craft beer consumer that wants like crazy different flavors, and they want to be described. This it tastes like peach, and this tastes like this, and tastes like this. And then you have the super uber beer geeks that want to that know the difference between a Dortmunder, right, and a Marzen, and they know the difference between a Vienna Lager and a Dortmunder, right? Like they really care about that aspect of it. And one of the unique things we have in this industry is that we're trying to cater to all those people at the same time, and we're getting these influences by our taproom guests who know our stuff so well, and they're giving us feedback, and the market's giving us different kinds of feedback. I think the idea that you started this off with, Mike, about like people want to know about flavors, I think that's accurate. I think that the greater market does want to know about flavors. If you can market your IPA and somehow market it almost like a seltzer, where like you have a picture of a peach and an orange and something, a pineapple on the label so that people know it's supposed to taste like those things, I think that can be really advantageous to you. But
Yeah.
that's not talking about the style so much. That's like kind of like being beyond style to
Yeah.
a certain
That's
degree.
true. Yeah.
And I think also it's almost a necessity because we have never had any guardrails put on us to say what a style actually is. We were never going to teach a consumer, an average consumer, what a West Coast IPA and an East Coast IPA or a New England IPA was. That was never going to happen.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Kevin. I'm just hopping over to a different beverage type, but sticking with the whole style thing because your previous experience being in the wine world, styles in wine can vary differently within that same style. Like ones that I know offhand as not as a very novice wine drinker, Pinot Noir, very big differences depending on country or even just region within the country. You get completely different types of flavors out of those types of grapes made for those types of wines. And Sauvignon Blanc, another one that I like that the American versions of it taste very different than the Australian versions
New
or New
Zealand.
Zealand versions of it and
Yep.
into others.
French.
Yeah. And like has this just always been a problem? Like, did wine drinkers have this problem with like, oh, I had this Sauvignon Blanc that I really like. I will try this one. Oh, that I don't like that one, but it's the same style.
This was one of the angles when you told me about this topic. I was like, oh, this is perfect because this is something I had so much experience with. And there is so much regulation on what can be called what in the wine industry. And I'm going to butcher some of these percentages because it's been 15, 20 years since I was in that industry. But to be a California or a Napa Valley Cabernet, I think you have to have like 75 or 85, maybe 90% of your grapes have to be from Napa Valley. In order to be a Cabernet, you need to have 75 or 85% of your grapes are Cabernet grapes. The rest can be made up of Merlot or Malbec or Petit Verdot, whatever else you're blending into it. And you have all of these regulations. Like if you're an Alexander Valley wine, an Alexander Valley Cabernet tastes different than a Napa Cabernet, tastes different from a Sonoma Cabernet, tastes different from a Columbia Valley Cabernet from Washington State. The average consumer will never get that a Columbia Valley Cabernet tastes different from a Napa Cabernet. But on the low end of the wines, I don't want to say the grape expression, at least back in the day, I don't want to say it's like more dumbed down and more simple. But like $10 bottles of Cabernet, a lot of times they taste like Cabernet. If you start getting into the more intricate vineyards in Sonoma Valley that have kind of a different terroir and their winemakers a little bit different and they're trying to express different flavors, it can. But the average consumer can walk still to this day into a Publix and go, I like Cabernet Sauvignon. And they can just buy a bottle that says it on the label. And for the most part, they're going to be pretty happy with it. I don't think we have that in beer. And it's a similar thing for Sauvignon Blanc. It's a little bit different because there are $10 bottles of Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand that tastes very different than like Josh Sauvignon Blanc from California. So there's always variance. There's always kind of muddled messiness there. But I do think there's probably more consistency in wine because you have to have a certain amount of one grape in the wine to make it the thing that you say it is. Whereas, Tim points out with lactose and bullshit in an IPA, you cannot pull my Waypoint IPA, my beers, and forget everybody else's. I just drank my Verdant Embrace. It's a hazy New Zealand style IPA. And you put that next to Waypoint, they are different beers. They are if you like Waypoint, you may hate Verdant Embrace. If you like Verdant, you may hate Waypoint. That's not good for the consumer. It's really not, because they both say India Pale Ale on the label. How confused is a person when they go and buy this beer and go, I'm supposed to like this because it's an IPA? And like I said earlier, they abandon the market completely. I understand what it sounds like as someone who's now in their mid 40s, who did a lot of crazy beers with adjunct ingredients and built my career off of it. But we need more regulation and guardrails, self done or otherwise, to let the consumer know what we're doing so that the consumer can trust us and say, oh, I like that thing, because there's not enough of it. And I think it's why we're not growing as an industry, at least in the Florida market. It's because people have said, fuck it, it's too confusing.
Yeah, I mean, you really did, like, when you brought back the thing about lacto and lactobacillus in an IPA, you really showed just how bonkers we can make a style be, and make it so very different. Like, where just the regionality of a grape by itself is one thing. Like, using different variations, different grown areas of the same type of ingredient is one thing. But when you take a completely different ingredient that isn't typically in said thing and throw it in there, is calling it that style, well, one, it's not true, but are you doing any favors for the consumer or for yourself by doing that? Yeah.
I don't think you are. And I think that we have, early on in my career in the craft beer industry, I believe that we were going to, excuse me, I believe that we were going to educate the population. We were going to convert people one by one and teach them that if you put a little bit of time and effort into this, you can kind of learn what these beers. And this is before hazies existed, right? But and because IPAs are so important to the industry because they're so popular, but we were going to teach them what a Hefeweizen and a wit were. I'm telling you, from doing 5,000 tastings at Total Wines and Whole Foods, no one knows what that is. No one knows that a Hefeweizen and a wit beer are different kinds of wheat ales or what they should expect to taste differently in them. Statistically, nobody. It's just people who know what Blue Moon tastes like. It's just people who might have had a Weihenstephan or what they would just call a German wheat beer, whether it's a, Weihenstephan or one or Franziskaner or whatever else it is. It's just never going to permeate the greater public. And if you want to just talk about dealing with and working with people that are educated and love this stuff, okay, well, we're talking about cut 99% of the people out of the population, and then we're going to super serve them. And if you want to build your business model off that, and you have the kind of geographical area that will do that, great. You can help to make those people learn about your styles or super serve people who already know about them. But we have gone so off the rails in giving. I I used to date a girl, the girl that used to live in or lived in Virginia. She used to say, "People like to think they know things." So it was one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard from a person because it describes all human beings so well. People get a little bit of knowledge and they want to think that they can extrapolate that knowledge to everything. So we have we have trained the customer to think they know what a style is and then disappointed them so many times because what we gave them tasted nothing like the style that they thought it was. And I've been guilty of being mad at this. I think maybe last year or the one before, someone got mad because our Waypoint IPA was cloudy, and they said they'll never drink the beer again because it looked like something their dad brewed in their bathtub. Well, okay, I was mad by that because have you never heard of a hazy IPA? But you know what? Maybe they haven't. Because why would they? They're not listening to United We Drink. They're not living beer every single day. They just drank IPAs for the past 5 years, and they're not interested in going that deep. Why should I be mad at that guy? Maybe I'm the one that misrepresented the beer.
Very true. Um, damn it, there was something right in there that I was like, I wanted to follow up on that point, but it is escaping me at the moment because if I talk slower, I will remember it, and I didn't. But so Tim stepped away for a moment, and I don't know where he went. Otherwise, I would throw to him in this instant. Um, what is there? Oh, I now remember. So I there's another brewery who is pretty new. They're probably only a few years old that I follow called Sacred Profane. They're a brewery in Maine that was started by a brewer who originally brewed for Notch in Massachusetts, who are big lager brewers. And her brewery is essentially they make two beers. They're both lagers, and they are called pale and dark. They are Czech style lagers brewed very traditionally, like something they put a little bit of effort into telling you about, but not a whole lot. Uh, they serve them on the Lucre side poles. They do different blends where you can layer them together. They'll do shandies. They do ways of varying those beers to give options other than having two beers on tap. Uh, but they have done what I think is a really good job of having some traditional aspect to it and being very focused on, hey, we make these Czech style lagers, but making them a little dumbed down by just calling them pale and dark. And like, these are our lagers. They are literally a pale lager and a dark lager. And take it how you want to. If you just want to have a pale beer, here we have it. If you want a dark beer, we have it. If you want to know more about what goes into these and these types of faucets that we're pulling off of, we'd be happy to talk to you about them too. I think that they've done a fantastic job of trying to appeal to the modern type of general beer drinker and also to the geeky ones at the same time. I mean, obviously, like I'm paying attention to them. Like I consider myself a somewhat geeky person, so I'm like keeping track of them.
Two things there. One, it's not the modern beer drinker; it's the traditional beer drinker. Because if you look
That's
at
true. It's very
traditional
true.
like British pubs, what did you have? You had a lager, an ale, and a cider on draft. You didn't have Dave's ale or this kind of ale. You had those beers, right? And you're also meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
We have been so focused, and and in some ways, rightly so. We wanted to educate people, and I don't want to get this twisted. I love certain styles of beer that we just don't make very much anymore. And some of those styles are slight twists on very popular styles. I think there is a lot of room in the industry for nuance, and I think we should be trying to push the boundaries and bring back old styles and trying different things. But at the end of the day, if you want to be a profitable company, if you want to sell beer and become part of your community, part of the culture, you have to meet people where they are, especially in a market that's abandoning beer and alcohol in general. Because, I mean, you talked about flavors very early on, and that's resonating in my head. Listen, seltzers kind of had their day. They're still very popular. They never took over the world like some people thought they were, Phil. But um, uh, sorry, Phil. Uh, but one of the reasons why those are popular is because it says right on the thing, this is cherry. Tastes like
Yeah.
cherry. This is
When you
orange.
you
It tastes like
alluded to
orange.
that earlier, I really wanted to burst in, and now I am. Uh, like you don't see those things with names like Bob's butt fucking what that is a terrible name.
Wow, you
Um,
you went there. Okay.
yeah, I don't know what came out of me there, but you don't see stylistic or not stylistic like fanciful names on stuff. It is White Claw, Black Cherry. It is High Noon, Pineapple.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that. It is the brand and then the flavor. You know, I was talking with some people on Blue Sky maybe a month or so ago, about how I've stopped putting descriptions for beers, our special release beers, on our 16-ounce cans because one, I don't think that people really read the descriptions, and it was just getting exhausting to try to come up with a description for a different description for a hazy IPA every 3 months or so. So I just stopped doing it. And in those conversations, I heard from a few people about putting just 3 flavor descriptors on there. Just like that could be a quick hit. Like peach, blah blah blah, pine, and I'm like, that could be a good thing. Like as long as it is clear that these are flavor descriptors and not ingredients, I think that something like that, just very simple and easy to see on the side, not like prominently, but I think that could be a way of letting people know, especially in this world where I always put hazy in our hazy names. It's on there on the can somewhere. So it hopefully does not get confused with any other type of IPA. But I think putting something like just quick little descriptors doesn't have to be a sentence, doesn't have to be a paragraph, but just, yeah, peach, pine, grass. Like, there we go.
And one of the things I want to point out, and Mike, you know a lot about this. I mean, I deal with this to a certain extent as well, but I know you've always been a stickler for this, working with like the government, essentially talking about the styles we can put on there. You can't put on Verdant Embrace right here, hazy New Zealand IPA, right? It's what it is. It's a New Zealand style IPA and it's hazy, but I can't say that right here. I can't tell you that because that is not a description that's recognized by the government for what this is. So we have 2 things working against us. One of them is our own just like erratic nature of designing new styles and creating them tomorrow. And the second thing is whether or not we can actually prominently display that on the label. I can put that all I want in this paragraph on the side of the can. It's not going to get read that often. If I
You also
had, but I'm saying if I had that and I could say it right here, I would, even though I don't
you
think a
also
lot of
don't
people would
need
get it.
that right there. You don't need India Pale Ale right there on the front. It can be on the side. Like you could put hazy India Pale Ale with New Zealand hops. Like that would be perfectly fine.
You can put that prominently on the bottom of the can instead of saying IPA India Pale Ale.
Yeah. I mean, you don't even have to, like I said, you don't even have to have India Pale Ale prominently on there. It can be on the side. It can be in a smaller font than that. It, it like, yeah, all of that's, I've always thought that, I mean, we don't need to get in deep into this. Like, you don't need that India Pale Ale really big on the front there. Like, I've noticed that on some of your IPAs before. I'm like, it's kind of an eyesore to have that just staring at me. That can be on the side. Like look at some other beers like probably the biggest one to me is what's it? God, Two Hearted. So Two Hearted is an IPA. They don't have India Pale Ale written out anywhere on there. It just says ale on the side. Like because that actually like you don't have to put India Pale Ale as your description. Putting just ale satisfies the TTB label for that. But
I'm talking more about the description of what kind of IPA it is, not necessarily labeling as an IPA. I think it is good to label IPA because IPA is something that is recognizable to people. I'm talking more about the specifics of it, whether or not we put India Pale Ale or IPA or what we put on there.
also another thing you could try is, and I don't know if this would necessarily work, is put New Zealand style because that's what they like to see is if it isn't
Style, yeah.
from the country, you put style, and it usually
Oh,
satisfies them. But I feel like you just put hazy India Pale Ale with New Zealand hops somewhere on the side, just like below your as long as it's the legal size that you need to have it at, like put it next to the barcode or whatever, and you'll
so
be good.
we have gotten really into the weeds with this, but I will say that I take what you're saying to heart. I'm talking more about um uh,
Yeah, we just
looking
got into like a government
but
approvals.
that's important, right? Because we have to work within certain limitations. I don't know if everyone knows that. Like there are limitations of what we can put on a beer. I can't say
But
that
those
I'm brewing a
but the,
Belgian double. I have to say I'm brewing a Belgian style Abbey double or whatever it has to say for that, which makes it extremely wordy. And then you have to work with visual cues. Like, does it look clunky to have all those words here? And what do we put here? What do we put there? I feel like saying that this is a Belgian double is very descriptive of what that beer is. A Belgian style double is
well, then you need to
more
have ale
accurate,
at the end of it too.
right?
But also they go off of what you give them too. So like you could essentially lie, and as long as
Oh
you
yeah.
put and you put ale, they'll be like cool. Like you could make a Belgian style double, or you could do a Scotch ale, and as long as the label says you don't even have to say any of that on there. It just says ale. They'll be like, cool, approved. Because they don't know any better. And that is what their guidelines say is that's all you have to put on there. You don't have to declare that it is a Belgian styled beer. You don't have to put that it used a specific type of yeast that makes it an ale or a lager. You could make a lager, call it an ale, put it on the label. They'll approve it because they don't fucking know and because their guidelines say it's what you put on the label.
Well,
Like,
what you're describing is the wild, wild west, right?
yes, it
Anyone
is.
can kind of do anything, and that's kind of getting back to what I was saying earlier. I am happy that I do not have to put in when I go for approval. I don't have to say, well, I made a Belgian double, so I used this percentage of Belgian candy sugar, D90, and I used a Belgian ale yeast, and this was the Belgian ale yeast I used. I'm really happy I don't have to do that. It's a lot of work, but we lose something when we can call anything we want. We do. And I think what we do is we lose customer confidence. And I think it has held the industry back to a certain degree. And the people who love it will always love it. And we're going to continue to make craft beer fans. I think we're making less of them than we have over the past 20 years, but we're still going to make them that really want to try these new styles and are going to kind of be lockstep with us trying all the new beers. But if you are making your money off of the casual beer drinker, I think more specificity on what these styles actually mean would be really, really helpful.
So let me ask you this. If what is a way that you think could be feasible for making style guidelines have some sort of teeth to them, and being like you need to adhere to this is what this is, outside of that is not what this is there anything that you see that is feasible that could be done and implemented to correct some of that?
Well, some of this might have it might actually be there. I'm just not aware of it. And I'm saying specifically, like, I've never put hazy IPA on any of our beers because I didn't know whether or not the TTB would accept that because I didn't know that that was a real thing that they could do. So part of this might just be my ignorance, and maybe there are some ways to differentiate a hazy IPA from a regular West Coast IPA or what have you. Now you can't say West Coast if you're not on the West Coast. So there are style. Not, I'm saying
West
not
Coast
prominent.
style?
But
Do they accept that?
I mean, we've had so many things kicked back in the past. Possibly, I'm looking, and we were talking about the difference between. And by the way, this is not a video podcast. I've been showing Mike a can of beer for the last 5 minutes, and he keeps telling me ways you can do things differently. The big letters on the front of the can that tell you what the style is. We have had things kicked back when they don't say India Pale Ale. We've been kicked back if they just say IPA. That's why we put India Pale Ale on it, because they said IPA is not a real thing. You have to say India Pale Ale on it. Now, you can put all the descriptions you want in smaller letters here on the sides or what have you. I guess what I'm getting at is if we had broader categories that were recognized by state and federal governments that allowed us to more specifically talk about what this is. And it would require people in the governmental level to have some kind of beer knowledge. So if we could say, this is a East Coast IPA, this is a West Coast IPA, this is a New Zealand IPA, this is a hazy IPA. If we had that and we did not get kicked back of saying West Coast IPA, well, you're not in the West Coast, you can't use that. I think that would be helpful because that would allow us at least more specificity in what we're doing, and whether or not the customer picks up on that or not, that's up to them. And then that's on us. We decide whether or not we want to market our beer that way. The second thing is, would it be a good idea to have some kind of ingredient threshold of what you're doing? It would require a lot of knowledge. I mean, if you're going to do a West Coast IPA and you're not, I mean, I know IBUs is just like that's like a term from basically 2005. But if you're doing a West Coast IPA and you're like 30 IBUs, you're not really doing a West Coast IPA, are you? And I'm not advocating for like having to do testing on these because I think it would kill a lot of small breweries. But I don't know. I don't think I have a fix for it. And maybe that's me not being imaginative or what have you. Maybe the real thing is we have to self-police and say we're not going to say a beer is a thing when it's not a thing.
Let me go back to wine real quick. So you're talking about like you didn't have the exact amounts, but that to be Cabernet, you gotta have X amount of Cabernet grapes in it. How is that determined, other than self-regulation in the honor system?
So I don't know the answer to that, but I'll tell you what my my expectation is with that. My guess is that there are people that will go and grab bottles off of a shelf and test it. So if you are a Napa Valley Cabernet, you probably have to prove, because a lot of vineyards will source grapes, right?
Yeah.
So they have to source grapes and they have to like declare, I got these grapes from this area, these grapes from this area. And there has to be some way for people to trace that. And then I don't know if genetically they can test to say, well, this has this much of this and this in it. Or maybe they have to do a site visit and they have to sporadic. I mean, every now and then, because we did some out of state distribution over the years, we have gotten people who have said, oh, well, you have this beer on the shelf in this place, right? It was like their regulatory body came in 3 years later and tested our beer for ABV, right? So it might be limited in those bodies that are doing it, but I think it's kind of similar in the wine business where they set these parameters and you probably won't get caught if you kind of don't do it. And I think that's fine. I think just having those regulations out there gets most people to fall in line with what they're doing without having to slap a lot of people on the wrist. And there will always be bad actors out there that say, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to follow those parameters. I'm going to do my own thing. And maybe they never get caught and they're small and they do business for 15 years and no one ever tests their beer. But, I mean, talking about Florida, I mean, I've had people, we've had our beer tested by governmental bodies for ABV and come back and say, oh, you were 0.4 over what you put on the label. So someone's out there doing some testing.
So this came to me as you were saying it. What are your thoughts then on still staying in the wine thing? Red wine as a descriptor, like just seeing a wine being called red wine blend.
Well,
Do you
I
think that
think
that is helpful, or is that a terrible descriptor? Because I guess a lot of the times it is blending stuff together that doesn't have a particular name or variant called to a style called for it.
calling something a red blend. I mean, I remember from my previous life when people say, "Oh, I really like red blends." That means nothing, right? That's like saying I like ales, right? I like red blends, I like ales. That's the same thing. You don't really know what you're talking about. You just have had like 4 and you said, "Oh, I like those 4, so I must like this thing." You don't know if it's a blend of Zinfandel and Petit Verdot or it's a blend of Cabernet and Malbec, right? You just know it says red blend. There's always got to be catch-all categories for people who want to experiment. And we can't put everybody in a box for everything. But there should be, for the lack of a better term, protected styles. Like we're doing this kind of thing so that the consumer knows what they're getting. And I think we should be moving more in that direction and not being in neutral where we are now. I think it would be helpful. Even if it's a pain in the ass for people like me, I would be not happy to. I would begrudgingly do it because I think it's a good idea to somehow, whether it's an ingredient list or a certain parameters for a style, especially when it comes to like the most popular things in our category. If you're going to call a beer a wheat beer, it should probably have some wheat in it. I just think it should probably be something that we say is expected.
So, admittedly, I missed some of this. I guess I wouldn't go nearly as extreme. Yes, if you're going to say that it's wheat, it better have wheat in it for sure. Um, I don't know. When you talk about wine, part of that has to do with specific varieties that people think they're getting. It becomes more of a consumer protection. I don't know that all beer styles necessarily fall into a consumer protection thing, especially since
Why does wine fall there and not beer? I'm confused.
because if I think I'm getting a certain thing from a certain region in a certain whatever, whereas Uh, so for instance, Blue Moon got in trouble because for the whole Belgian thing. It's not a Belgian beer. They don't want to mislead the consumer. But if this is a stout or a porter or a black ale, to me, that's not really misleading the consumer, especially because styles evolve so much that I feel like if you have to put such a structure that people have to follow that again, ingredients that might harm the consumer or ingredients that mislead the consumer as to where those are coming from. Certainly, like if I called something an Italian pilsner and I had 0 Italian ingredients, maybe that's misleading, but I'm also not charging a premium for that Italian pilsner over another thing. I think that's where wine gets to be more because they charge a premium for certain things.
That's
Whereas
true.
in beer, I don't think we're charging a premium to the point where we're defrauding the customer by changing it. I think we're just getting lazy and muddy, and I think that's all. The style drift is driven as much by the consumer as it is by the manufacturer. Whereas in wine, I feel like that is that the I don't know what the word is. The responsibility is on the manufacturer. If I say I got these ingredients, I got these ingredients. But if I just say, "Hey, this is a hazy IPA," but it's not really a hazy IPA, well, I'm calling it this because that's what all my consumers are calling it. Um, to me, I like the idea of being more explicit with ingredients. But as far as putting something so um, rigid that styles have to fit into there, I feel like to me as a brewer, I feel like that would stifle more than anything, and do a disservice to the customer.
By the way, I want to say that's a really fair argument. I mean, I take that to heart. I mean, I do. I really pine for transparency.
Mhm,
That's a really important thing for me. And I want to grow consumer confidence in brands without hindering creativity in small breweries. That's a
mhm.
thing that is really important to me. And coming from the wine world, I have some expectations that are maybe not realistic for the beer industry. The other thing I want to mention is that if we're looking for something that is uh, a good thing for the long-term health of our industry, in the beer industry in particular, we might not want to look towards wine because they're down more than beer and
Yeah.
liquor, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
they're, they're struggling. They're struggling even more.
that
I'm
was
tr-
the other thing that I was going to say
yeah.
is, great, they have all these
Yeah.
regulations, and what has it gotten them?
Yeah, and I'm looking at it and going, well, and then I was trying to come up with an argument for this and saying, well, when I go and get a reposado tequila, I know that this reposado tequila is going to taste different than this other one. I
Mhm.
know that,
Yeah.
but I'm expecting a base level of flavor or an Irish whiskey or whatever it is that I don't think I'm getting out of beer. And I don't
Bec
know anything about those industries or how they're regulated. I
it
know that there's, bourbon and there's whiskey. I know a lot about this. I don't know enough from the inside. I
well,
I
I don't,
just
and
I'm
even
sorry, go
on
ahead, Tim.
those, when you talk about whiskeys, yeah, there's the whole, "Oh, well, you can't call it this unless it's 51% corn," or "You can't call it this unless it was from this certain thing." Those are more specifically to what the drinker of those wants. I don't think the drinker of beer wants those things. I don't think
But what drinker? Are you talking
n
about the average consumer or the people that love craft beer?
both.
Okay.
I don't think either of them want I don't think people are drinking craft beer for the same reason they're drinking reposado, or they're only drinking Italian or, Irish whiskeys. They're drinking Irish whiskeys because they think Irish has a certain amount of thing to it. I don't think that style, that cachet for that first of all, you're talking largely in wine and in spirits, you're talking about regionality. And with beer, that has been thrown out the window for decades,
Sure.
right? Because we're sourcing ingredients from all over the world, and we're having to change uh, sources from all over the world. If you call something, yes, if you call something, uh, you know, Italian or what, if you're gonna, reference something, I'm fine with appellations, right? Like I'm fine, but I think 99% of consumers don't give a shit that it's not a real champagne, that's a sparkling white. And I think in beer, it's tenfold that. I don't think they care. I don't think Joe consumer cares. I don't think craft beer nerd cares. I think they wanna know what the ingredients are, and I think most brewers are have been pretty open to sharing what their grist bill was, what their hop bill was, what yeast they use. In fact, I think they're probably the most open out of all of them.
But
Frankly,
but
I don't know that any spirits tells me, what the grist bill was, almost never,
but
or
does the average consumer have any idea what mosaic tastes like? You know what I'm saying? When you put those things on the label and being as transparent as possible and just putting
yeah,
IPA on the front, do they know that Nelson Sullivan tastes like this and Mosaic tastes like this and Milwaukee tastes like this? I mean, we're being transparent in some way, but the label itself still says India Pale Ale. It says IPA.
yeah,
I'll go back to this and by the way, I your position on this is pretty much 100% correct. I think that you you're looking at the market in a very realistic way. But as a person who has done hundreds, maybe 1,000 beer events, tastings over the last 10 years or so, I've never had someone come up to me at a like passive. I'm not talking about like extreme beer fest or what have you. I've never had someone come up to me and I poured them an IPA and they go, "Oh, is that a West Coast? Is
Oh,
that
see,
a
I
New Zealand?"
see. Well,
That has never happened to me.
oh,
No one says
you
that.
have to then you have to come up to Minnesota because we get those
But
questions
okay,
all the fucking time.
so
All the fucking
we're
time.
not gonna turn this into some kind of tourism video for our
No,
podcast from Minnesota.
no,
But
I'm just saying.
Tim,
I'm just saying it's probably more. It's probably more than the bubble than you're in.
and that's fair. And I am in a bubble, and I have to be realistic about things outside of it. But if we have a consumer base that just will never really get interested in that and will never know it, then
Mhm.
they have no curiosity to it.
Yeah.
And we're running them off because we're giving them a product they think is supposed to be one thing and it tastes completely different from the last thing. It does hurt the market. It does drive people away from craft beer when they say, I can't count on what this is supposed to taste like.
Mm-hmm.
That's my experience. And it could
absolutely.
be isolated. It could be completely isolated. But that's my worry as
So how do
someone
you-
trying to sell beer.
So how do you take? So if they don't know what mosaic tastes like, how do you take that wine model and apply it? Because to me, that's not. All you're doing is you're further fractioning them into even more substyles and substyles and substyles, right? I guess I don't see how, oh, this IPA has a lot of mosaic, this IPA has a lot of galaxy, this IPA has a lot of whatever. Yeah, they are different. I think what I've seen from consumers is maybe just a different experience. Yeah, sure, some people get turned off by IPA. But I've found a lot of people who've discovered that they like IPA through that as well. I think you know, I don't know. I'm reticent in any way to go ahead and to feel like we're going to regulate our way out of this style mudding.
You're probably not wrong. I mean, no, I mean, as much as I want to see some more consistency so that a consumer can know more about what they're grabbing, one of the things I suggested is that we loosen regulations on how we label the big letters on the can of what this IPA is. In doing so, when you have a Cabernet Sauvignon from the Alexander Valley, sometimes it's pretty prominently displayed. So if you want to learn about that, you can.
Yeah.
Whereas my feeling, and I could be off base on this, is that we have pigeonholed every IPA to be this, and we've pigeonholed every almost wheat beer is this. It's a wheat beer because we're trying to market to a customer that says, "Oh, I like wheat beer. I like Blue Moon." But that's a Hefeweizen. That's not Blue Moon. It's just not. It's nothing like that.
Yeah.
But we're marketing to them this way because it's easy and it's allowed. So it gives people false impressions about what they're consuming.
Again, allowed to me is where my sticking point is, and maybe I just need to let that point go. But then
you don't have to.
But then that also becomes the onus on us in marketing is also to educate. If we want people to understand, but by the way, wheat beer is too broad of a category. This is Hefeweizen. It's a very specific wheat beer, and it's very different than a Belgian wit. Even though a lot of people will say they're very much the same, they're not. And I think that becomes the marketing play, not the we have to do away with these, because especially those things that don't fall into, because styles. I mean, look at BJCP. Look at the standard that GABF uses, which isn't BJCP. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. They change those categories every year. There's new styles that come in. There's styles that leave. There's styles whose definition changes over time. They're not.
They group them together sometimes.
They group them together. They're not hard and fast rules that you get in spirits. They're not hard and fast rules that you get in wine, and that has to do with the complexity of the ingredients, right? Even your blended whiskeys still have a limited grist bill.
Yeah.
You're not
parameters.
You're not well, but we have a lot more. We have New Zealand hops that are going to taste very different than
like spirits have what, like 5 grains, 6
Yeah, I was gonna
grains
say
that
the
use.
the ingredients are way more. And okay, so you want to talk about wine? People want to taste a difference, and beer they don't. They're two completely different things. If if this if this year's uh, Anderson Valley uh, Zinfandels taste exactly like last year's, they feel like they've been had. They like the idea that each crop year has a different thing, has a different.
But again, I'm sorry to cut you off, but again, we are talking about the nerd versus the regular consumer.
Sure,
The,
sure,
the the regular consumer at the grocery store does not want it to taste different.
sure. Okay,
They
no,
have no,
that's fair.
Yeah.
but and I think it's important as we're talking about all these things. I think it's important to differentiate these. I always talk about my business and saying I have two completely different businesses. I have the person who really cares about this and they're a craft beer consumer, and I have the person who has no idea that
Mhm.
we're a local brewery in a tiny, footprint. They
Yep.
just think we're Budweiser.
Well,
And
so
there's a difference there.
that's customer segmentation.
Yeah.
That's first year marketing. You know what I mean? I mean, like, look. Okay, so perfect example. Um, Gatorade and Propel. What's the difference between them?
One's
Wasn't
watered down.
Propel, yeah, one was marketed as water, and maybe is the same thing, but just with a higher percentage of water added to it.
Yeah, i- basically. But they've created two completely different.
Is that still around?
Yeah, yeah. I had some great Propel this weekend.
Oh.
Yeah, I love it because it's like watered down Gatorade, which is all it is. They've created two completely different segments, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to market Gatorade to the mom who's going on a walk and to the athlete. And what Gatorade said is, "Fuck that! I'll just make a watered down Gatorade and set and market that to the mom that's going on the walk, and then market the Gatorade to the guy who thinks he's Michael Jordan." Like that, that's the smarter way to do it than what we're doing. We're trying to sell one product to two different people rather than trying to market
But
the
I'm
right
just a
product to the
thirsty
right
dude,
person.
and
Yeah. I,
Where's
I,
the
that's
market
why
for
I want
me?
Gatorade.
I think that's where we screw up is that we lump all of our beers and all of our and together. You know what? If that Joe consumer doesn't like IPA, fuck it. Then I'll make the beer they do like, and I don't have to worry about what the label on it is.
And Tim, I first of all, Mike, if my doctor told me I had athlete's foot, I'd be like, that's not my fucking foot. But no, I think you're right to a certain degree. I think that when you are trying to appeal to a broader market, the specificity on what you're marketing and what you say a thing is more razor focused.
Mhm.
It's more of a, oh, I'm used to this thing, and oh, I might like this other thing, so I'll try it. I mean, I know it's cheesy, but like put it to like a tomato sauce that's on the
Yeah.
shelf, right? Like I like this one, so now the BOGO's on this, so I'm gonna try this. Oh, maybe I like this one better. And there maybe there's no perfect way to do it, and maybe that we shouldn't be regulating it. I'm completely open to that idea. I mean, I'm just saying that I worry my biggest worry in all of this is when you allow people to label anything the way they want to label it. I'll back up here. When I was working for Funky Buddha back in the day, and we were learning how to brew on any kind of tiny commercial brewing system, we went up to Matt Webster at what was called Corner Cafe at that time. And Matt led us into his little tiny brewery and brewed a batch of beer with us, me, Jim Bast, and Ryan Sens. And we were interested in beer, and he did a whole brew day with us, and he taught us everything he did. And we literally copied his system piece by piece. It was it was opposite. His lauter ton was on the other side or whatever it was. But we were so thankful that he helped to teach us something. And we said, how can we repay you? And he said, please make good beer. Just please make good beer. Because if someone drinks your beer and it sucks, they're never going to drink my beer. And if you just make good beer, we can all succeed. And part of me is looking at this industry and saying, if we just present our beer in a way that is digestible to the average consumer, we can make someone who says, I don't like Belgians. I don't like IPAs. I don't like this style. We can have them say, oh no, I do like this because there's some consistency within it. And whether or not that's, specificity within that style or some
See,
regulation, I don't know. But
and I get again, this is where I struggle because I think craft beer is at a different part where that does not. People have figured out who they like and who they don't, and what breweries they'll go to and what ones they don't. You look at an even more mature market, burgers. Is there a big difference between a steakhouse burger and a McDonald's? Yes, they're both burgers, and consumers have figured that out, and that steakhouse chef is not worried about McDonald's improving the quality of their hamburger so that they elevate all hamburgers, and now people understand why they're paying $40 for a hamburger. They've called that as a differentiating point, and I think that craft beer, I think, has now gotten past the point of like we've fatigued our customers. It's not that we have all of these new people have never heard of craft beer. They're sick of it already. And so I think when you talk about these things about how we need to make IPAs taste the same so everyone knows what an IPA is, I think that's where I think that's why craft beer is dying, because all hazies taste the same. Everyone tried to make a hazy IPA all taste the same, and now it's boring as shit. If I have to make an IPA have these 5 specific flavor characteristics, then why would I bother making 5 different IPAs? Why would I put one IPA under 5 different names and market it that way? To me, I feel like that is where our market has moved beyond that type of thinking. I don't think the rising tide lifts all ships.
But
I don't buy that anymore. I bought that 10 years ago. Don't buy it at all right now.
But that's in fairness, that's not what I was saying. I was using that as an example of the fact that the market does dictate the way people view a product in some way, shape, or form. I'm not saying the rising tide raises all boats. I don't believe that, and I would never say that at this point. I'm just saying that the perception of one beer when someone tries an IPA for the first time is going to cloud their perception of every IPA after it.
Yeah,
and if that beer tastes markedly different than every other beer they try, they're not going to latch onto it.
Now, do the exact same thing with a burger. If the first burger I had was bullshit, am I ever going to say fuck burgers? No,
I don't think it's fair. I just don't think that's a fair.
Why not?
Because
it's a new experience.
No, because the people who buy a beer on the shelf at Publix have an expectation that all these things are kind of similar. A person that buys a burger at Wendy's does not expect the burger to taste the same as they have a beer at the steakhouse or a burger at the steakhouse.
I completely disagree. That's why there's different brands. People don't expect all potato chips to taste the same. They know what brands they like and which ones they don't. And I feel like we've gotten that with IPAs. I know which IPAs I like and which ones I don't. And maybe I'm going to try a new one this time, or maybe I'm going to be brand loyal.
So I see both of your perspectives on this, and I think where it really breaks down is, and I see it in this conversation, is how far along you think that beer is in the lexicon or meta mind of things, and it seems like, to Tim, you see craft beer or beer in general as a more advanced thing than I think that Kevin is giving it credit for in the general market. So when you guys are at that different point, it is going to be a slightly different opinion on that, because burgers are a lexicon thing. Like it is part of everyday life. Potato chips are too.
It's Americana.
And-
It's
Yeah.
And you know
But-
what? Like beer is like macro beer is. That's why we have people who have been. I'm a Bud man. I'm a Miller man. I'm a Coors man. Like for way longer than Ken Grossman had a glimmer of hope in his eye for pale ale. Like I still I'm a little leaning with Kevin on. I just don't think that beer is, or craft beer is quite there yet to be in that general knowledge of people.
See,
But
we talk ad nauseum about how this industry is dying. It's dying because it's losing consumers, not because people don't know.
Yeah.
No, it's dying because we're
yeah.
losing consumers, and I think people are opting out of the market because of in one way because of inconsistency. I think people don't know what they're getting.
But we've had
And-
inconsistency during all of the boom too.
Oh no, but
yeah.
Sure, of course. I mean, I think it's a perpetual problem, but I think you have a general understanding of what things are supposed to be, and I always go back to one day I was doing a tasting at Total Wine and More, and I tried to give a guy a sample of one of our beers, and he goes, "You know what my IPA is? This is my IPA," and he held up like a Busch Light, case or whatever it was. Now, I don't know if he was just being silly or funny, but part of me thinks he doesn't know what IPA is and never will. It's just the idea that IPA is beer and this is his beer and this is a kind of beer that he's into. I guess what I'm getting into is that I think we have a relatively uneducated public about what we do.
Yep.
And I think that when we confuse that relatively uneducated public about what we do, it makes less people able to grasp onto it.
Then market
And-
it better.
Well, you're asking a bunch of mom and pop breweries to market themselves better, and quite
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know how you do that.
Let's
H-
go
how,
back to
how
what
do you market?
Let's go back to what Mike talked about when we kicked this thing off. What flavor profiles am I getting out of this? Like that
Yeah.
to me, because I don't
And
care.
that might be the answer.
Yeah, because I don't care what you label a beer. If labeling is going to solve this, and I don't think it is, I don't care what you label a beer. Tell me what it's going to taste like. Tell me what it's going to taste like. That's the best way to get someone into there. You know how I converted people who hated IPAs? Not by telling them all IPAs tasted the same, by actually saying, hey, this might taste a little bit different than what you had. Or, hey, this one actually is more fruity and floral and not so bitter. Or, hey, and I think that's why Hazy's took off, because they went, oh, you can be an IPA and not be so mind-blowingly bitter that it destroys my tongue. To me, that's marketing. I'm not saying spend a bunch of dollars. I'm not saying go hire advertising firms. I'm saying get your bartenders and your brand ambassadors and everyone else to be better at describing. I don't know how many times I go to a tap room and bartenders are absolute shit at describing beer. That is marketing dollars.
Two things here. First of all, I'm glad that that's not just a Florida thing, because I've perpetually thought that it is just a Florida thing, that you go to a tap room and the bartenders don't know how to explain the beers. Through most of my travels, I go somewhere and bartenders in tap rooms can explain every single beer so beautifully. So thank you for making me not feel like we're the complete fucking worst here. I mean, we are, but for feeling that for a few seconds. But you were not here when we touched on something about this earlier, and I talked about how I've decided to not put descriptions on our special release cans that we just do in the tap room anymore, because I was exhausted by doing it, and I felt like people just didn't read them anyway. And I brought that up on Blue Sky, and through talking with people, came up with like this. People were talking about putting just a couple word flavor descriptors like peach, piney, blah blah blah. Like just having something like that, and I'm like, you know what? That that would probably work. As long as it's clear that these aren't the things that are in it, but these are flavor descriptors, having something like that as opposed to some nuanced fucking description that no one actually is going to read or get, and someone put a lot of work into something like that for nothing. I think that is very helpful. So you could have IPA, and for the argument, I always put hazy anytime it's a hazy on the description anyway, so it always says hazy India Pale Ale. But I think then having something that says mango, passion fruit, pine, like here are 3 quick flavor descriptors. I think something like that can be very helpful to a cluttered style market like IPA.
That's what we did at Badger Hill, and it worked great. Every board on the tap list had 3 descriptors. Every sell sheet we gave to our distributors had 3 descriptors for each beer. Like, these are the 3 things we want you to say about our beer. Not sentences, 3 words. Or maybe compound words. But it doesn't have to be extravagant to be better. A lot of times simpler is better.
Yeah.
But to me, I don't want, if we want to make sure that craft beer dies, make everything taste the same. I think that's, I mean, I look at so many other things that have gotten boring. I mean, look at every single fucking SUV out there. They all look exactly alike. And they've started to suffer, not just for gas reasons.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. I'm not saying to make things taste the same. And I'm also not even advocating necessarily for the theoretical ideas that I've thrown out. I'm saying that within the category of West Coast IPA, there's tons of variants.
Mhm.
You can do insane different flavors within that, but
Yep.
there are parameters on bitterness and the kind of malt bill and things of that nature that people can grab onto and see that, oh, this kind of tastes like this. Whereas this other category of IPA tastes completely different and is basically a different animal altogether. I think there's a possibility of making those things 2 distinct kinds of brands that people will then over time grow to understand and realize what they like about those. Now, maybe that's not a possibility. Maybe it's insane. I'll put that out there. I'm not putting my nickel down on that. But I think what Mike is saying about like using flavor descriptors, I think that's a really great idea. I think dumbing things down and saying this is what this tastes like is what people are looking for. And
Yeah.
I think we also have to understand the market that we're really selling to. And if you are a small brewery that is selling to an educated public, I think you're selling a different brand. If you're a 2,000 barrel brewery like mine, which is relatively small, the vast majority of people who will consume my beer will never go on our Facebook page,
Mhm.
will never consume our content, will
Mhm.
never even know that we are produced in the same state they're buying the beer. The
Mhm.
vast majority of people. So
Yep.
I can do my best to tell a story, to do all these things to educate those people, and they will never ever come across it.
So
So
if you
my
make a piney IPA, make the word piney a bigger font and bolder than IPA on the can, on the label.
yeah,
Like
and
that to me, you don't have to use Instagram or tell a story or all of that stuff. A lot of beer labels out there are shit. They're just shit. They don't tell me anything about the beer. If I want to sell something, you like just say what's on there. I mean, you go to wine, I look on the back of wine and it says notes of tobacco and blackberry. Like on even the cheapest Kangarilla Road, it says that shit. I almost never see that on craft beer because it seems like they're all trying to be all hip rather than just convey information.
well, I think everyone has their own thing. I mean, we have probably too many words on our cans that describe what the beer is
You
supposed
do.
to taste like, and at the end of the day, most people don't read it.
Yeah, I'm not
I
reading a
think
novel.
I think the understanding that Mike's talking about is like putting like some buzzwords and doing it in a,
That's
a
also what I'm saying.
notated
Yeah.
style really, really can help. Uh, I think in a lot of ways we're in the same boat in kind of where we've come to. I, I I just I would be remiss if I didn't say that I think that craft beer is confusing to the vast majority of people, and they opt out because they don't know what they're getting. And if I had personally, I can't talk to anybody else. I won't talk about you guys. I won't talk about anybody else that's in the business listening to our podcast. If I had 1% more of the market in my local business, or for my local business, I should say, that would opt into craft beer because they understood it a little bit better and it was a little bit simpler to them, I would have no problems. I wouldn't have any issues whatsoever, and I'd be laughing all the way to the bank. And I think part of it is because our branding is confusing and complex, and it's something they're never going to buy into. And I am in favor of anything that simplifies that, whether or not it's just putting flavors on the label or making styles more uniform, whatever that is, so that people can feel like they know things and feel confident in what they're picking up. I want to promote consumer confidence, however that looks.
I'm with you there, and I'm also on. As much as I am that guy who's kind of a stickler for the regulatory bodies of making sure that your TTB stuff is all right, uh, I'm for less of it. Like I am right there with Tim. Like I don't think that we need the government stepping in and saying like this is what you need to do in order for this to be classified as this. I think that we could dumb down that shit. Like the fact that still today, in the year of someone's Lord 2025, IPA is still not an accepted declaration of beer style from the TTB is insane. Like the fact that they think that no one is going to understand what that means and that you have to spell it all out like is just dumb and ludicrous. Like the TTP has made many of changes in the time that I've been in the industry. They Some of the great things was allowing certain ingredients to be declared on as an ingredient without having to give your recipe, because they used to be like if it was outside of malt, hops, water, yeast, sugars too, like we need to see this recipe and we need to approve it before you even get label approval
Mhm.
on it. And I think it was like in 2013 or 2014, they just approved a straight out amount of typical ingredients, a lot of fruits, a lot of uh, spices and things like that that were commonly used in beer, and said, oh, look, you don't need to get a formula approval on these sorts of things, but this is how you still need to put it. But we've done that and we still have IPA is not acceptable. Look,
Yeah, I mean,
we can-
I think that is backwards. I think that's a category error more than anything. I mean, I actually wish we would go back to tightening up formula approval because there are a lot of breweries putting some shit in beer that is maybe there was a brewery that got in trouble because they put milfoil, an invasive aquatic plant into beer, which is not approved. Because the other thing is now, as someone who went through a safe quality food inspection over the last 2 days, alcohol gets away with everything.
oh yeah.
Which is dumb.
We
Like
we were texting about that over
yeah,
the weekend, or I feel
yeah,
like, and
yeah.
it was like you talked about the immediate amount of more regulation and just oversight that you have seen working in that industry that beer does not and probably should from that side of things
Absolutely,
from the
absolutely should. We also believe this myth that all beer is safe, that like beer has no risk of botulism or anything like that. But the reality uh, Clostridium botulinum really enjoys a anaerobic, water-rich environment, which is what beer is. And while the alcohol does have antiseptic qualities, it really starts to take effect after 6%. And when you see a trend towards people making lighter, down to 2.5%, some beers I see around here are. There is a huge. I mean, the chance is not like it's super great, but I see a lot of bad sanitary practices, and a lot of people aren't pasteurizing. And by the way, even botulinum spores can survive high heat environments as well. So pasteurization is not a panacea by any means. Um, but I think those other issues that are in there, beer would benefit from tighter regulations on things like formula. But as far as
the manufacturing side of things.
on the manufacturing side is where I would rather see a lot more of the
But
regulations
in the
going in rather
marketing
than in the
and
marketing
labeling,
side.
like which is what
No.
we're essentially talking
Yeah.
about. Like
Yeah.
I do think that a deregulation of some sorts, like there is actually one thing of regulatory that I would like to see more of, and that is of allergens. The fact that allergens don't actually have to be placed on beer labels, I find mind-boggling. Like that, like a person could, in theory, consume a beverage. Like Kevin has made beers with peanuts. I have made beers with peanuts, and that there is no allergy statement that would need to be placed on any of that. Uh, the fact that, and someone could come in, drink that, not know that there's a peanut not just one peanut, but many peanuts in that, and could fucking die. Like, I
I mean,
do feel like
in fairness, one of the beers I made with that was called Don't Tell Reese. So that Reese's Pieces, the Reese's peanut butter cups, there's peanuts in
well,
there.
yes,
If you know Reese.
You know that.
Well,
You don't.
see,
You know.
see, I don't know that there's peanuts because there's plenty of there's plenty of
A bit
nut-free peanut
facetious,
butter
and I think
flavoring.
Kevin was
I
too.
was being ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was trying to be silly.
But I think the fact that there are these, like, yeah, I said IPA, that we have to spell out India Pale Ale, that the abbreviation hasn't become the actual nomenclature at this point in time is silly. Like I'm trying to think of other things that they're uh that their shortened versions have become the regular instead of it being spelled out. But like, it's just, we could deal with less regulation in those aspects. But I agree with Kevin, and I think that Tim, you said something about this too, is having maybe some protected like styles in there of sorts, especially like really legacy type of things, probably from your more European varieties. But I'm all for, like, if you're doing something that is IPA and base, and then you're doing something like, well, just state that, like, this is an IPA with lactobacillus and lactose added to it. Enjoy. Good luck. And maybe you should have that too on the label. Good luck.
With all the things that I've said that are very regulatory, I've also advocated for the loosening up of regulations and making some of these styles more pronounced so that the consumer can start to learn about them. If we're talking about a West Coast IPA or a hazy IPA or what have you, if you are able to put those things on the label so that people can start to consume that information and understand the differences between those things, it also deepens the knowledge potentially for those that want that knowledge and are interested in learning about it. Um, I mean, I think I mean, in some ways, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, right? I want both those things. I want it to be simpler, but I also want when it's more complex that people can recognize it, so that everything doesn't have to be labeled as the same thing. I I mean, at the end of the day, Mike talked earlier about Two Hearted. Two Hearted and High Life are very different beers.
Yeah.
And one's an ale, and Mike was saying this, which I did not recognize, and one's an India Pale Ale or an IPA. And a lot of people would say, well, like, they're the same thing. Well, they're not. They're very, very different beers.
Two Hearted actually changed their branding from Two Hearted Ale to Two Hearted IPA a few years ago. Like
Okay, well,
it is
Yeah.
like it's always been an IPA of sorts. I guess technically it's always been an IPA. But what I meant by that, what I said earlier is, so they say Two Hearted IPA right on the front of it, but they don't spell out India Pale Ale on there for the regulation point. They just
Okay.
then on the side of it in small, like somewhere around their SKU, says ale, which satisfies TTB regulation.
I guess what I'm saying is that the fact that Mike had to reiterate the thing that he said earlier is unnecessarily confusing. And I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. And I want,
That should be the name of the episode, unnecessarily confusing.
if I
Writing
had
it
a
down.
if I had a wish for this market, it was that we would be able to, not as Barrel Amongst Brewing or Copper Point or any other brewery. If I had a wish for this market, it would be that we as an industry can educate the consumer just by what's on the cans, what's on the bottles, and be more transparent with what those things are, so that people can find their thing. And when they try something different, they go, "Oh, I didn't like that. That's a hazy IPA. I don't like hazy IPAs. I like West Coast IPAs." And if we can find a way to do that, and maybe it's already happening and I'm in a remedial area that is not educated, that's very possible. But I'm still dealing with the fallout from that confusion, and it's making me think of things in a different way, whether it's right or not.
I mean, 10 years ago, we had, I don't think Texas has these laws anymore. Um, where if it was above a certain percentage, it had to be called an ale.
Yeah.
It had nothing.
It's gone now, but
Yeah.
they did used to have.
Yeah, they used to have it. So, and so, the big example is Rogue Dead Guy Ale is a Maibach. It's a German Maibach. Rogue Dead Guy Ale. They had to call it ale because of the percentage, and they were selling it nationwide, particularly in states like Texas. And it's not the only one. New Belgium had one that they called an enlightened ale that I don't think had ale yeast either. I think it was New Belgium.
1554.
Yeah, and so just whenever they do, then the laws almost immediately make no sense, or very quickly get out of making sense.
States' rights, though, right? Am I right?
There's a lot of instances where we can point out the ridiculousness of things, how we have to label our beers or what have you. And it's very complex for us as breweries, and it gives us like cloudy ways to go forward with our marketing. At the end of the day, when I was part of Funky Buddha back in the day, I was adamant that Floridian had to be called a Hefeweizen because it was a Hefeweizen. And they were like, no, we can't call it a Hefeweizen because no one knows what that means. We have to call it a wheat beer. We have to call it an American wheat beer. We have to call it something other than a Hefeweizen because no one will be able to comprehend it. And these are the kind of marketing decisions that we all have to make every day when we're working within this industry. And it's understandable that some people just say, well, what's the most marketable thing we can say? I'm going to call this a stout. I'm going to call this an IPA. I'm going to call this an ale. I'm going to call this a this. Because it's easier. My blonde ale with guava, single in Havana, we realized calling it a single meant nothing because a Belgian single, no one knows what that is. But calling it a blonde ale, well, all of a sudden, I can sell that. We're all victims of this kind of simplistic culture of beer understanding.
Well, we're all victims of believing the squeakiest wheel too. I had a previous taproom manager that was adamant that we not give her a saison to put on tap because she could not sell a saison, and I'm like, well, then you suck at sales. And she's like, no, we cannot put a saison on. No one knows what it is. It's terrible. The most popular brewery in Minneapolis right now is known as a saison brewery. And it's not because we've got this rich history of saisons here. It's because people learned. And I think they didn't learn because of you know, clear descriptions. They didn't learn because, labels or whatever. It's also, we have to accept that sometimes consumers, for as much as we want to market to the dumbest, I think we need to give consumers more credit than we do. Boy, there are an awful lot of Dortmunders doing really well right now, and a lot of other and people that are saying, "What the fuck is a Dortmunder?" Well, then try it, and they do. I think we need to give consumers a little bit more credit than we are. I think the reason why people are rejecting craft beer isn't because they're confused. I think they're rejecting it because they've been there, done that. I think they're rejecting it because it's become passé, because it's become a bigger brand as a whole rather than any specific style. And I think what you're seeing is the muddying of styles right now is a last ditch effort rather than a concerted marketing effort. And I think yeah, we have a job as producers to educate our consumers. We do, but I think we also need to. I really don't think that we're just giving consumers enough credit, frankly.
One thing I want to point out about that is I cannot at all speak to your experience, and the examples you're giving are important. I think we also have to look at the nature of the market where you live and your experience, and understand that it might not be the same experience of Florida or South Dakota or wherever else it is. And realize that, just like I always say, my business is like 3 different businesses, and I'm not in the same business as X brewery or what have you. Maybe I'm not in the same business as a craft brewery of my exact same size in Minnesota because of the education of the consumer. And I'm not trying to like shit on Florida. I know everyone does that. But I think banking on the uneducated nature of the Florida consumer, if I'm going to put my nickel down and spin the roulette wheel, I think I'm going to win that one if I'm betting on the uneducated nature of the Florida beer consumer, because across the board, it's not, they don't know. They don't know the same things.
I think I've seen the Florida craft beer scene grow quite a bit to actually get a level of breweries that actually have national recognition in a way that they didn't before. And I don't think that comes purely from an education piece. I think the other thing we have to remember is, if you want to make beer for the dumbest consumer, you still can. But that doesn't mean that you have to try to sell your smartest beer to your dumbest person, right? Like sometimes somebody just wants a red car. They don't care what size engine is in it. They don't care what features are on there. They want a red car. And I'm going to sell them that. And I'm not going to sell them that by talking about all the features and the engine size if they don't give a shit about it. But I'm also not going to sell it to I'm not going to use those words. I'm not going to take a car to a car nerd and say, "Hey, this one's red." They want to know all those specs. They want to know those things. I think we still need to understand that the consumers that are going to go after IPA and stay in IPA are probably flavor uh, uh, more open to flavors. They're more adventurous in the first place, and I think. Yeah, there's a percentage that have just written off all IPAs after one IPA experience. They're probably not a very reliable consumer for you anyway, because you're never going to be able to grow because you're constantly going to be having to convince them of something new because everything is always going to change. And if I'm constantly having to convince you that you should buy my product for X, Y, and Z, I'm going to go after the people that I know that are already adventurous in the first place. And I think that is the challenge. Is yeah, there are probably some really dumb consumers in Florida. They're probably not going to be the ones that are going to make you the money you think they are. I think we get the customers we ask for. I think that is probably the biggest thing is uh, you don't dumb down for your smartest, and you don't talk up to your dumbest. It, it, I mean that to me is how marketing works, and that's why Bush Light works on NASCAR, right? Like they're not marketing to NASA. I think even in the dumbest markets, and I don't say dumb by like IQ, but from education standpoint in craft beer, um, I, I then you find the niche that does, right? I mean, fuck, there are some breweries that are huge that are only in one state because they found the right way to do that. You know, I mean, look at New Glarus. Perfect example. You say, "Oh, that's a beer drinking state. That's a beer drinking state." No, that is a Miller state. That is a Miller. I mean, they are the brewers based off of the cheap American macro lagers made in that state. New Glarus is one of the largest craft beer brands, and they don't leave that state because they went, "Oh, well, I'm not going to go after that 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 Miller Lite drinker. I'm going to go and go somewhere different and attack that and teach that way." And sure, maybe they brought along a lot of Miller Lite drinkers along the way, uh, but it's not called. People aren't still referring. I know it's not Miller Park anymore, but people still aren't thinking of New Glarus when they're thinking of the Milwaukee Brewers. They're still thinking of that blue collar drink. And New Glarus found a different way to do that. I think to me, it's because they didn't speak down to their consumers. They didn't. Did they bring along those? Sure, but did they target them? No. I think target your best consumers, and your worst consumers will follow, or they weren't going to be good consumers in the first place. That's my 2 cents.
You make some good points there, and it comes down to just marketing and balancing that act, right? Of what you said is not talking down to your dumbest and talking
No,
up
don't.
to your smartest. How to do that properly is at each brewery's discretion, really.
Yep, absolutely.
Um, I think probably a good point to head into last calls. All right, let's go to last calls, the point in the show where we give each other an unspecific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that we want, whether it be beverage related or not. The only rules are that it is uninterrupted, unopposed, and unobjected. I'll kick things off here. Uh, I don't I feel like I might be one of the least, if not the least, political of our co-hosts in our last calls. Kevin's looking at me all weird. I feel like he's the number one most political one of us in this. But I wanted to talk about my local representative in the U.S. House of Representatives, and that is Lois Frankel. Someone who has represented me since 2012, with the exception of 1 year that I lived in Philadelphia with my wife. She has been my representative for over a decade. She was previous to that a two-term mayor for the city of West Palm Beach, which I am a resident of now. I was not when she was the mayor. But one thing that I do recall from her time as being a mayor of West Palm Beach is her hatred of the 500 block of Clematis Street, a big part of our downtown area, which is filled with culture. It is filled with art. It is filled with live music, with bars, sure, restaurants, but it was where the counterculture kind of hung out. I went to many a shows at Ray's Downtown Blues and Spanky's and Respectable Street there. Respectable Street is the only place that still exists out of those three now. I played shows at many of those places. It was a part of who I was, but her outright hatred and disdain for that area of downtown stuck with me. And when she started running for the U.S. House and my districts, even when I lived in Boynton Beach, she was my representative there. I would purposefully not vote for her because I hated her outright hatred of people like me who hung out in the 500 block of Clematis. And I would vote independent anytime that I was given the opportunity to vote independent, if there was someone to do. As things have changed over the years, I have been forced to have to vote for her just to not vote for the crazy person on the ballot. But it has become so clear to me in the year of someone's Lord 2025 that Lois Frankel doesn't give a fuck about anyone in this district. She doesn't give a fuck about any of her constituents. She has she voted for the bill that gave credit to ICE and gave them a pat on the back for what they're doing in our country right now. She opted not to vote for the resolution of I'm sorry, uh, of she voted not to go for the resolution of impeachment for Trump for bombing Iran. And she just wants to take the free ride along with things right now. She's been in Congress for over a decade. Let's just keep on going. Get that free money, get that free health care. When she was presented with the opportunity of doing a town hall for her constituents earlier this year, when so many representatives were asked to do so, how did she choose to do it? Virtually on a Monday during afternoon rush hour for 45 minutes. 5:30 to 6:15. That is telling the people you don't want to hear from them. We need better representation in the 22nd district of Florida. Lois Frankel, you say you're a Democrat, you don't do shit for us. So I'm just voicing my displeasure. I sent an email to her earlier this week. I'm sure some person read it and just hit trash on it, but fucking fed up and frustrated with the way things are going. At least there's some guy doing good things in New York that is making us feel a little bit of good and wanting to have someone like that behind us. Yeah. Evan?
Well, thank you, Mike. So one of the worst things about running a business, one of the best things about running a business is the fact that you get to employ many people and you get to hopefully help to better their lives. I think I've said this either in a last call or just randomly in our podcasts over the years. But one of the worst things you have to do is you have to fire people. You have to move on from companies that you've worked with for a long time. And as of now, we have just recently moved on from our marketing company. And I'll talk a little bit more probably in the future about who we're working with now, because it's someone that people on the podcast might be familiar with, or people listening to the podcast, I should say, might be familiar with. But I do want to give a shout out to Masterwing, which is the company that was doing our marketing, and they will be doing our marketing for the rest of the month. And we decided that we wanted to go in a different direction, and for multiple reasons. One, are financial reasons. Things are tough right now in the beer industry, and our tap room's down, the market's down. It's a struggle right now in South Florida, but in Florida probably overall. And we're going with now a company that has a little more experience with the craft beer industry for marketing, and we think that's going to be an advantageous thing for us. Maybe it won't be, we don't know. But I called up um, Ethan Dangerwing, who is a person I've known for many years. He was the photographer at my wedding and ended up opening a marketing company down the road that we then worked with. And I had to give him the bad news that we were moving on from them. And he was gracious and kind and thoughtful. And I made it kind of easy on me to make that transition happen. And as a person who has to give bad news to somebody, that was really appreciated. And as a business that has to have bad news put upon them on a regular basis about, bars that don't want to carry your beer anymore, that was a little bit of a demonstration of how we should be gracious in the way that we deal with people. We're not always the best fit for everybody. And at the end of the day, if you are confident in your business, like I believe Ethan is in Masterwing in his marketing company, he knows that he's going to have other opportunities with other people. And that if he's gracious and kind and thoughtful and receiving that bad news, those things will come back to him. And I think I'm just kind of giving it out there. First of all, if you're looking for a marketing company in South Florida, Masterwing was very good for us. We moved on to them for different reasons other than performance, financial reasons, and once again, in the particular market that we're in. But also, I want to stress that the way that you are doing business represents who you are and how you're going to go forward in that business. And I really appreciate the way that they did things. I encourage them and really want the best for them going forward. And for anyone else that is in that same position where you're losing a draft line or what have you, being gracious and thoughtful in that will come back to you because you did things the right way. That's all I got.
Tim?
I'm going to get political too, but I'm not going to single anyone out. I'm not going. Well, I might call out Chuck Grassley. I have a proposal for Congress that we should treat it like we used to treat Division I athletes. I think there should be not only term limits but age limits. Not on the younger side, but on the older side. I would love to see that anyone over the age of 65 is no longer eligible to represent their district. Or at least, maybe this compromise is you're not able to be more than 10 years older than the median age in your district. I do not think that you should have name, image, likeness rights. I do not think that you should be able to make money off of public speaking, off of book deals, off of anything else. Think back to the college football athlete that lost his eligibility because he also happened to be a professional snowboarder, and they said you can't be a professional in one thing and an amateur in another. I think you should make more than the salary should be the median income in your district that you represent, with no other ways to earn income beyond there. I remember talking about Chuck Grassley's net worth with my dad, and he's like, well, as far as I know, he's not really that rich because he's really just been a farmer. And I was like, Dad, his net worth is over $7 million. He's not getting that through running a small family farm in Iowa. He is getting that through speaking deals, through public appearances. I think they should be outlawed. I think what you're finding is we've got too many rich old white men running the country, which is why you have this stupid big beautiful bill that is neither big nor beautiful and barely a bill, is getting so much traction. I don't have an update from today in the House, but I think you've got a people who have completely lost touch. It's one banana, Michael. What can it cost? I feel very much for is going on. So if we treated them more like we used to treat college athletes, that you don't get any special privileges, and we're going to want you like a hawk. And if you take so much as a pen from anybody, you've lost your eligibility to run. I think that would get a lot of people that are career politicians. Again, Chuck Grassley, who's 3,000 years old. He is not only was he around before craft beer, I think he was around before beer in general. I think he helped the ancient Egyptians discover how to make it. I think he is not doing anyone any good in public office at all. And I think even your most noble of public servants sure seems to be able to leave Congress a lot wealthier than they went in, which I would be willing to bet 90% of their constituents do not feel that they have left that same 4-6 year whatever term richer than when they went in. I think that I'm not saying that would solve everything, but boy, would that make decisions about public policy and public spending and where tax dollars get spent would be vastly different. I know we had things like an emoluments clause and all of this bullshit that a Supreme Court, which will be a rant on a different last call, will be the absolute ludicrousness of our Supreme Court and how dumb our founding fathers were on setting that up. But yeah, if we treated our representatives like we used to treat college athletes, sure, you can get all the fame and adulation, but you're not making any money off of it. And by the way, when you get too old, you're no longer eligible to be involved. Oh, and if you have other experience in these other places, you're not going to be able to be involved. I think that would do more to clean up the swamps, so to speak, than any other bullshit measurement. And the biggest challenge is the only people who can enact it are the people who it would hurt the most. Kind of funny, huh? So yeah, let's all start treating our politicians like they're 19-year-old indentured servants.
Anything you want to plug, Tim?
I have really gotten into the Target brand. I think it's Good and Gather. Purple berry drink mix. So go check that out.
Kevin?
Nope.
I like turtles. Oh, this just in. Chuck Grassley aged another 1,000 years right now. If you would like to support this show, you can check out our website, unitedwedrink.com. Go to the Brands We Love page, and there's stuff there that you can check out. And if you click on those links and buy anything from them, we get a little kickback for that. It's called affiliates, and that helps us out. If you want to follow the show, we are on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram. So go find us there. Our website, I think I said before, is unitedwedrink.com. We're on all of the podcast streaming services. And other than that, I hope that you didn't blow up a finger or three or anyone during your 4th of July festivities. And I assume that if you're listening to this, that probably didn't happen because otherwise you'd be in jail. But
Or
which
the
jail
emergency
anymore?
room, or the
Or
yeah.
emergency room listening to this podcast.
Or playing
Or-
for the Giants.
JPP. Or you'd be in the Everglades asylum or whatever the fuck they're actually calling that fucking place. Um, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.